They thought they could silence her, but when Caroline Levitt fought back with a lawsuit, the entire show was canceled overnight. The stage lights beamed down as Caroline Levitt sat across from the liberal talk show panel, her expression calm but firm. She knew exactly what she was walking into. For months, the show's hosts had attacked her policies, mocked her views, and dismissed her as just another far-right extremist. But Caroline? She wasn't there to back down. The interview started normal enough. Talks about policy, the upcoming election, and her views on the economy. But then, just when the conversation seemed civil, the lead host, Mark Reynolds, decided to go for the kill shot. "Caroline, let's be real," he said, leaning forward smugly. "Do you really believe someone like you, young, conservative, and let's face it, a little too extreme, has a place in modern politics?" The audience gasped. Caroline raised an eyebrow. "Too extreme? For believing in free speech and secure borders?" Mark smirked. "For pushing ideas that many would call outdated, even dangerous." That's when another panelist jumped in, laughing. "Oh, come on, Caroline. Let's be honest. You're just a pretty face for a party full of old men clinging to the past." The crowd erupted, some laughing, others stunned by the blatant attack. But Caroline? She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward, her next words sending shockwaves through the studio. "So, let me get this straight. You invited me here not to debate me but to insult me? You don't want a conversation, you just want to shut me up." The hosts shifted in their seats, caught off guard. But what Caroline said next left them scrambling for a way out. What happens when a struggling waitress unknowingly catches the eye of a billionaire? Is this the break she's been waiting for? Or is there more to his presence than meets the eye? Stay tuned. Things are about to take an unexpected turn. Emily stood behind the counter of the small diner, her hands moving mechanically as she took orders from the steady stream of customers. It was a Saturday, and the place was busier than usual. She had been working here for over a year, and while the tips were decent, the job was draining. The hours were long, and the pay was barely enough to cover her bills. Despite her exhaustion, she kept a smile on her face, serving each customer as if they were the most important person in the world. But behind that smile, she carried a quiet weight, a weight that no one could see. The diner wasn't glamorous by any means. The chairs were old and worn, and the floors creaked with every step. But it was home to many of the local regulars who came in for their daily coffee or breakfast. Emily knew most of them by name, and they knew her too. Some of them were kind, but others were less so. One man, in particular, had made it his mission to belittle her every time he came in. He was a wealthy businessman, always in a suit, always condescending. Today, he sat at his usual table by the window, glaring at Emily as she took his order. She approached him with a forced smile, asking if he needed anything else. He barely acknowledged her, just waving his hand dismissively as he pointed to his coffee cup, which was barely half full. "Could you at least try to do your job right for once?" he sneered. Emily's face flushed, but she didn't respond. She had learned long ago that arguing with customers like him never did any good. She just nodded and refilled his cup, careful not to spill a drop. As she walked away, she overheard his muttering under his breath, calling her lazy, useless, and saying she would never amount to anything. The words stung, but she had heard them all before. She kept her head down, trying not to let it get to her. But as she moved through the diner, clearing plates and taking new orders, something felt different today. It wasn't just the usual insults that hung in the air. It was the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. She was tired. Tired of the constant struggle. Tired of working 2 jobs just to get by. Tired of being invisible. She had dreams, big dreams. But every time she tried to reach for them, something held her back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the reality of her situation. Or maybe it was the constant stream of people telling her that people like her never make it. It felt like no matter how hard she worked, she would always be stuck in this place, in this cycle of struggle. Then, something unexpected happened. As she moved past the counter, a man caught her eye. He was sitting alone, dressed simply in a faded jacket and jeans, a pair of glasses perched on his nose. He had the look of someone who was out of place here, like he didn't belong in a diner like this. He wasn't one of the regulars. He didn't seem to be in any rush. Emily wasn't sure why, but something about the way he watched her made her uneasy. It wasn't like the usual customers who barely noticed her. This man, he was paying attention. She caught his gaze, and for a moment, it felt like he could see right through her. She quickly looked away, walking back to the kitchen to grab another order. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this man. She had seen him before, though. Maybe in passing, or maybe she had just noticed him for the first time today. Either way, he didn't seem to be the type of person who came to places like this often. As she returned to his table to check if he needed anything, he looked up from his menu, his eyes meeting hers again. "I'll have the special," he said, his voice calm and polite. But there was something else, something thoughtful in the way he spoke to her, something that made her feel seen. She nodded and turned to leave, but as she walked away, she couldn't help but notice that he wasn't like the other customers. He wasn't rude, and he wasn't dismissive. In fact, he seemed almost interested in her. The thought made her uneasy. It was strange, after all, for someone like him to even pay attention to someone like her. As she handed the order to the cook and returned to the front, Emily saw the man watching her again. This time, there was no judgment in his eyes, only curiosity. It was almost as if he was waiting for something, waiting for her to do something. She was about to ask if he needed anything else when the bell above the door jingled, signaling that another customer had entered. Emily quickly turned to take their order, but when she glanced back, the man was still watching her. There was something oddly reassuring about the way he looked at her, but she couldn't quite figure out why. It was as if he knew something about her that no one else did. Little did Emily know, the man who had been watching her so intently wasn't just a regular customer. He was a billionaire, someone who had seen and experienced the kinds of struggles she faced. He had watched her for a reason. He wasn't there by accident. And soon, his actions would change her life forever. The day dragged on as it always did. Emily went through the motions, serving customers with a smile that barely hid her exhaustion. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, though. That man, the one who had been watching her, kept lingering in her thoughts. His calm demeanor, the way he seemed so different from the rest of the people who came in. She couldn't help but wonder who he was and why he was paying so much attention to her. By the time her shift was almost over, Emily was ready to head home. She could barely think straight, her mind consumed with thoughts of the stranger at the counter. Was he just another passing face, or was there something more to it? She tried to push the thoughts away, telling herself she was just tired and overthinking. She grabbed her purse, ready to leave, when she saw him again. He was still sitting there, sipping his coffee, staring out the window as if lost in thought. He hadn't moved from his spot since she last saw him. Something about his stillness made him stand out even more. Emily stood frozen by the door, considering whether she should say goodbye or just slip out quietly. But before she could make a decision, the man stood up and walked over to her. "Hey, Emily," he said softly, his voice steady but carrying an undeniable warmth. She blinked, surprised that he knew her name. "I hope I'm not keeping you from your evening, but I wanted to talk to you for a moment." Her heart skipped a beat. How did he know her name? She didn't remember telling him, but there was something about the way he spoke, calm and collected, yet kind. She nodded, not sure what to expect. "Can I help you with something?" Emily asked, trying to sound casual, though she was dying to know who he was. The man smiled gently, his eyes twinkling with something she couldn't quite place. "I've been watching you for a while now," he began, "and I have to say, I'm impressed by your work ethic. But more than that, I see something in you. I can tell you're not just going through the motions like most people here. You're different." Emily felt her face flush. It wasn't often someone complimented her, let alone said something like that. She had always felt like she was invisible, like no one really cared. But this man, this stranger, had noticed her in a way that no one else had. It made her feel both seen and vulnerable at the same time. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "But, I'm just doing my job. Nothing special about it." The man shook his head, his smile widening. "No, Emily, it's not just your job. It's you. I've been in this business long enough to recognize someone with potential, and I want to help you." Emily's heart raced. Help her? How? She wasn't sure whether to be flattered or skeptical. She had heard all kinds of promises in her life, but none of them had ever amounted to anything. People in her world didn't just get handed opportunities. They had to fight tooth and nail for every little bit of success. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaky. "Why would you want to help someone like me?" The man's expression softened. "Because I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it feels like to be overlooked, to be told that your dreams are out of reach. But that's not true. Everyone deserves a chance." Emily took a step back, overwhelmed by the sudden flood of emotions that hit her. She wasn't sure what to make of this conversation, but something about him seemed sincere. Maybe he wasn't like the others. Maybe he really did want to help her. But how could she be sure? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the counter to her. "Call me when you're ready. I can offer you an opportunity to change your life, if you want it." Her hands trembled as she picked up the card. It was simple, plain even, just a name, a number, and an email address. But there was something about the way he spoke that made her pause. She had nothing to lose, right? Maybe this was the chance she had been waiting for. "Why me?" she asked, still unsure if she should take him seriously. He looked at her intently, as though he was weighing his words carefully. "Because I see your potential, and I believe in giving people like you the chance to prove what they can do. You've got the heart for it, Emily. I can help you get to where you want to be." As he turned to leave, he gave her one last look. "Think about it. I won't ask again. But when you're ready, don't hesitate to reach out." Emily stood there, staring at the card in her hand. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this man? What kind of help was he offering? Could she trust him? But most of all, could this be the break she had been dreaming of her entire life? As the door swung open behind him, the bell jingled once more, and the man disappeared into the evening night. Emily looked down at the business card in her hand, her heart pounding in her chest. There was something about him that felt different, something that made her believe that for the first time, someone really saw her. For the first time, someone believed in her. The next day was a blur. Emily tried to go about her usual routine, but her mind kept drifting back to the man and that conversation. The card still sat on her kitchen counter, untouched. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads, that this could be the moment that changed everything for her. But doubt lingered in her mind. What if it was all a scam? What if he was just another person preying on someone like her, someone struggling, someone desperate for a way out? As she prepared to go to work, she caught a glimpse of the card again. The name on it seemed so ordinary, so forgettable. Yet something about it felt like a lifeline. Was she brave enough to call? Or would she keep playing it safe, stuck in the same dead-end routine she had been in for years? The hours at the cafe passed slowly. Customers came and went, each one blending into the next, until Emily saw him again. The man was back, sitting in the same spot near the window, just like the day before. This time, though, there was something different about him. His presence seemed more commanding, as if he had a purpose. Emily's stomach fluttered with nerves. What was he doing here again? She tried to ignore him, focusing on the task at hand, but her thoughts kept drifting to the conversation they had. What if he wasn't like the others? What if he really could offer her a way out? Midway through her shift, Emily found herself walking over to his table. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because he had given her that card, or maybe because something about him felt like a door to a different world, a world she had only ever dreamed of. He looked up, his eyes brightening as if he had been expecting her. "Of course. I was hoping you would." Emily sat down across from him, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. She didn't know where to begin. Her mind was racing, her thoughts a jumbled mess, but somehow she knew that this moment mattered. This could be her chance to break free from the life that had felt like a prison for so long. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. About the opportunity you mentioned, and I guess I just need to know, what's in it for you? Why do you want to help someone like me? He leaned back in his chair, studying her with a calm, almost knowing expression. It's simple, Emily. I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to struggle just to make ends meet. I also know what it feels like when someone offers you a chance to change your life. Emily looked at him, her heart pounding. But how can I be sure? People make promises all the time, and it never leads to anything. I don't want to get my hopes up only to be let down again. He nodded, his expression serious. I understand. I've been in your shoes before, but I'm not offering you empty promises. I'm offering you a chance. The decision is yours, but I'm here to help you if you're willing to take it. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, Emily couldn't speak. She wasn't sure if she was ready to trust him, but something in his eyes told her that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't like the others. Maybe he really did care. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice trembling. I've never had anyone believe in me like this before. I'm not sure I'm ready. The man leaned forward, his tone soft but firm. You don't have to be ready yet. You just have to be willing to take the first step. The rest will fall into place. You'll see. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had always been afraid of taking risks, of stepping into the unknown, but something inside her had shifted. She wasn't sure if it was his words or the way he looked at her, but she felt something stir in her, a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. Okay, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll take the first step. The man smiled, his eyes glinting with approval. Good. That's all you need to do. The rest will come. Just remember, Emily, this is your chance. Don't let it slip away. As she left his table and went back to her work, Emily felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. She had taken the first step. Now, she wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time in her life, she felt like it was worth the risk. Little did she know, that simple decision would set off a chain of events that would not only change her life forever, but also reveal the truth behind the billionaire who had come into her world like a whirlwind. The days following her decision felt like a blur of anticipation and uncertainty. Emily couldn't shake the thoughts of the man, the stranger who had offered her a chance at something more. Each time she walked into work, her mind raced, wondering when the next step would come. She kept the card with her, tucked safely in her purse, like a lifeline she wasn't sure she was ready to grab hold of. It was on the third day after their conversation that she received an unexpected call. It was the man, the same calm, steady voice on the other end of the line. Emily, it's time, he said, and his words sent a jolt of electricity through her. Are you ready to take that first step? Her heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, and yet she felt paralyzed. What if she wasn't ready? What if she failed? I think so, she stammered, her voice uncertain. But what exactly do you want me to do? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then he spoke again, his voice warm but firm. I'm going to send a car for you. There's someone I want you to meet, someone who will help you understand what's possible. This is the real deal, Emily. You just need to trust me. The phone call ended, and Emily stood there, staring at the receiver in her hand. A car? A meeting? She felt overwhelmed, unsure of what she was getting herself into, but part of her felt that the time had come to take a leap of faith. That afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment. The driver, a man in a sharp suit, opened the door for her without a word, his face expressionless. Emily hesitated, looking back at the comfort of her small apartment, the life she had known for so long. She felt a wave of fear grip her chest. What was she doing? Was this a mistake? But then she thought about the life she had, the constant struggle, the endless days of working just to survive. She had spent so many years trying to keep her head above water, always wondering if there was something more, something better. And now, here it was, right in front of her. With a deep breath, she stepped into the car, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. The car started moving, and as it drove through the city streets, Emily couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between her life and the world she was entering. The cars on the road grew more expensive, the buildings more impressive, and the people they passed seemed to live in a completely different world. The driver didn't speak, and Emily couldn't bring herself to ask where they were going. She simply sat in silence, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't deny that she was nervous, but there was also a part of her that was excited by the unknown, excited by the possibility of change. Eventually, the car pulled up in front of a grand building, tall, sleek, and impressive. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight. She had never seen a place like this before. The lobby was filled with marble floors and polished glass, and the people inside seemed to move with purpose and confidence. It was a far cry from the quiet, unremarkable cafe where she spent her days. The driver opened the door for her and gestured for her to step out. As she walked into the building, she couldn't help but feel like an outsider, like she didn't belong here. She had never been in a place this luxurious, never been around people who seemed so powerful. She felt out of place, but she pushed the feeling aside. This was her chance, and she wasn't going to let her insecurities hold her back. She was led through the building to a private office where the man was waiting for her. This time, he wasn't just some stranger. He was someone who had taken an interest in her, someone who had seen something in her that no one else had. "Emily," he said, standing up as she entered the room, "I'm glad you made it." She nodded, her mouth dry. "I didn't know what to expect." He smiled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "I know, but that's the point, isn't it? Life isn't meant to be predictable. It's about taking chances, stepping into the unknown, and seeing where it leads." He gestured for her to sit, and she did, her mind racing. What was he going to ask her to do? What kind of opportunity was he offering? "You're here because I believe you have the potential to do something great," he continued, his voice steady and confident. "But first, I need to know if you're truly ready to make a change. This isn't going to be easy. It's going to take everything you've got. But if you're willing to put in the work, I can promise you that your life will never be the same." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. This wasn't just a job offer, it was something much bigger. She had always known that the life she wanted wouldn't come easy, but this was the moment of truth. Could she handle it? "I'm ready," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "I'll do whatever it takes." The man smiled, clearly pleased with her response. "Good, then let's get started." As the meeting continued, Emily realized that she had just crossed a line that separated her from the life she had known, from the struggles and limitations of her past. And in that moment, she understood something. This was her chance to rewrite her story. But the journey ahead would be far from easy, and the twists and turns were only just beginning. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, challenges, and an overwhelming sense of pressure. Emily found herself in a world that was both foreign and exhilarating. The man who had given her this opportunity didn't waste any time pushing her limits. Every day, she was faced with tasks that stretched her in ways she hadn't imagined. At times, she doubted herself, doubted if she was truly capable of handling it all. But every time she faltered, the man's words echoed in her mind. "You have the potential to do something great. Don't waste it." As the weeks passed, Emily started to notice changes in herself. She was becoming more confident, more assertive. She learned how to navigate the high-stakes environment with a sense of purpose. But despite her growing success, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something else going on, something deeper beneath the surface. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting, she found herself alone in a quiet corner of the office, trying to collect her thoughts. Her mind raced with questions. Why had the man chosen her? What was his real agenda? Was this all just a way for him to prove something? Or was there more at play here? Just as she was lost in her thoughts, the door to the office opened, and the man walked in, his expression unreadable. He stood there for a moment, observing her, before speaking. "Emily," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I need to ask you something." She looked up, startled by the change in his tone. "What is it?" He walked over and sat down across from her, his gaze steady. "I've been watching you closely. You've made incredible progress, but I need to know if you're truly committed to this journey. This isn't just about business or success. It's about something bigger." Emily's heart skipped a beat. What was he talking about? She had already proven herself, hadn't she? "What do you mean by something bigger?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I'm not just offering you a chance to succeed in the corporate world, Emily. I'm offering you a chance to change everything, your life, your future, your place in this world. But there's a price to pay for it. Are you willing to pay it?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. A price? What did he mean? She had worked so hard to get to this point. She had sacrificed so much. But now, something felt different. It felt like she was being drawn into something far bigger than she could ever have imagined. I don't know," she stammered, feeling a sense of unease creeping in. "What do you mean? What price?" He didn't immediately respond. Instead, he just looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "There are forces at play here, Emily. Forces that will push you beyond your limits. But if you can survive it, if you can rise above the challenges ahead, you'll be rewarded in ways you can't even begin to comprehend." Emily felt her stomach tighten. This was no longer just about a job. It was about power, influence, and something much darker. Something she wasn't sure she was ready to face. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she whispered, her voice shaky. He stood up, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. "I didn't expect you to be, but you'll find out soon enough. The choice is yours. But remember this. Once you step into this world, there's no turning back." The weight of his words hung in the air, and Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She was in too deep now. She couldn't turn back, not after everything she had invested. But at that moment, she realized that her life was about to take an irreversible turn. She had no idea where this path would lead, but one thing was certain. Her world had just changed forever. As the days passed, Emily found herself grappling with the choices ahead. The pressure intensified. Her role became more demanding, and the stakes grew higher. She had moments where she questioned everything, where she wondered if she was in over her head. But then she would remember the man's words, and she would push forward, determined to prove herself. One evening, as she was preparing to leave the office, she received an unexpected call. It was from her mother. Emily hadn't heard from her in weeks. The call caught her off guard. "Emily," her mother said, her voice shaky, "I've been hearing rumors. Are you involved with some powerful people? Are you sure you know what you're getting into?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. How had her mother found out? Was she worried about her? Or was this just another sign of the dangerous path she was on? "Mom, I'm fine," Emily said, trying to sound reassuring. I'm just working hard. Everything's fine." But her mother wasn't convinced. "I don't trust these people, Emily. You've changed. I can see it. You're not the same person you used to be." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. Was her mother right? Was she becoming someone she didn't even recognize? It was hard to say. She was caught between two worlds, the life she had always known and the new, powerful world she was stepping into. And in that moment, she realized that no matter what she chose, she couldn't escape the consequences. As she ended the call and stood there in the silence of her office, Emily knew that the hardest part of this journey was yet to come. The choices ahead would define her future, but she had no idea just how much the path she had chosen would change her. She couldn't turn back. There was no going back now. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of transformation for Emily. Under the mentorship of James, The billionaire whose unexpected kindness had set this all in motion, she found herself learning things she'd only dreamed of. Corporate meetings, strategic planning, public speaking, skills she'd never imagined mastering as a waitress juggling bills and late shifts. Each day pushed her beyond her limits, testing her resolve, sharpening her instincts. But even as she grew into her new role, shadows of doubt crept in. Emily couldn't help but wonder why James had chosen her. Out of the countless people struggling just like she had been, why her? The question nagged at her, especially during quiet moments when she found herself alone in her sleek new office, the city skyline stretching out before her like a canvas of endless possibilities. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, James invited her to his penthouse for a private dinner. The setting was surreal, an opulent dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows that seemed to touch the sky, chandeliers casting a warm glow over the elegant table set for two. Emily felt out of place, her thrift store dress contrasting sharply with the luxury around her. James watched her with that same piercing gaze he'd had the first day they met, a look that seemed to see right through her. "You've done well, Emily," he said, his voice rich with approval. "Better than I ever expected." "Thank you," she replied, her cheeks flushing. "But I still don't understand why you picked me. Why you went to that diner at all." A shadow passed over James's face, and he sighed, setting his wine glass down. "I've built my empire from the ground up, faced unimaginable struggles. But somewhere along the way, I lost touch with the world, the real world. Seeing you, working so hard with so little, reminded me of where I came from. I needed that reminder, and I needed someone with real grit to help me remember." Emily stared at him, a mix of awe and confusion swirling in her mind. "So, this was all some kind of test? For you?" "For both of us," he corrected gently. "I saw your strength, your resilience, and I wanted to nurture that. But I also needed to rediscover my own humanity, to connect with someone who still believed in fighting for something. In a way, you saved me as much as I saved you." Tears stung at the corners of Emily's eyes. All this time, she'd thought she was the only one benefiting from his generosity. She hadn't realized that she was also giving him something he'd lost: hope, perspective, the raw courage of someone who's had to claw their way through life's challenges. James leaned back, his gaze softening. "The truth is, Emily, you've changed my life as much as I've changed yours. This isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning. I want you to keep growing, to keep pushing boundaries. And I want to be there to help you every step of the way." Emily felt a swell of gratitude so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. She nodded, a small, determined smile curving her lips. "I'm ready, for whatever comes next." James raised his glass, a spark of admiration in his eyes. "To new beginnings, then." Emily clinked her glass to his, the sound ringing out like a promise, like the start of a new chapter neither of them had seen coming. What happens when two lives collide in the most unexpected of ways? How does a simple act of kindness ripple out to change the world? If you've been inspired by Emily's journey from struggle to success, don't miss out on our next story, where another twist of fate changes everything. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more incredible tales of transformation.